We now move on to the final session of day one, and it is one that touches every session that has preceded it because none of what we have discussed today is possible without reliable, quality, accessible health products. This session will seek answers to a very human question. Will the right medicine reach the right patient at the right time? We begin this session with a keynote address from the United States Pharmacopoeia, to whom we are deeply grateful for supporting this session for the third year in a row now. Joining us virtually from the United States is Dr. Emily Kane, Senior Vice President for Global Health and Manufacturing Services at USP. Dr. Kane leads a global portfolio that supports regulatory authorities and manufacturers in meeting international quality standards. USP is one of the world's most respected standard setting bodies for medicines and health products, and her work plays a critical role in translating those standards into practice. Emily, we truly appreciate you joining us despite the early hour for you, and also for sticking around despite the delays. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction and for the opportunity. And let me just see if I can get my slides up here. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Minutes. Okay. And hopefully my slides are visible.
Yes, Dr. Emily, we can see them.
Okay, excellent. So thank you again. My name is Emily Kane. I lead the Global Health Division at the United States Pharmacopoeia. And really, I want to focus my talk today on the journey to strong regulatory systems. And really, that's a key enabler to some of the things we're going to be talking about related to reliance, harmonization, and ultimately efficient timely access of medicines for patients. So first, I'll give you a little overview of who USP is, what we do, and what we've been doing really in the pharmaceutical ecosystem, particularly around regulatory system strengthening. And then I'll talk a little bit about regulatory maturity and how it's a key enabler for reliance and harmonization. Then I want to double click and give you a sense of what the journey to regulatory maturity entails, some of the key challenges, and also some of the solutions and enablers that we've seen implemented or have been able to help implement in the regulatory space. And then a little bit about what's ahead, what's next. So USP, as already mentioned, is actually more than 200-year-old independent scientific nonprofit organization. And fundamentally, our mission is to advance access to quality medicines and medical products globally. And to do this, we do several different activities. We're perhaps best known for our standard setting. We set standards for quality of medicines that are utilized globally, but we go beyond that and we advocate for measures that advance the quality of medicine, advance standards for quality of medicine, and also that advance resiliency in the pharmaceutical ecosystem. And last but not least, we provide capability building programs which really help advance our mission. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those. So for more than 3 decades now, USP has had the opportunity really to work across the pharmaceutical ecosystem to advance its mission of access to quality medicines globally. How do we do this? We work with national and regional regulatory authorities, quality control laboratories, and manufacturers. We support regulatory authorities and quality control labs really to advance in their maturity and reach international standards. And similarly for manufacturers, we directly work with manufacturers largely of essential medicines that are in short supply to help them reach stringent regulatory approval. Typically, that's in the form of WHO pre-qualification. So we work across the pharmaceutical ecosystem. In the past 3 decades, through this work, we've had the opportunity to work in more than 90 countries around the world. We've supported hundreds of manufacturers and quality control labs to reach international standards on their journey to maturity or stringent regulatory approval. And we've worked with 71 national regulatory authorities, all striving to advance their regulatory maturity. So why does maturity matter in reliance? Well, fundamentally, for one regulator to rely on another regulator, there has to be trust, and there has to be trust in mutual quality of those regulatory decisions. Also, there's a need for a common language or framework to enable information sharing and reliance. Fortunately, with the advent of the WHO's global benchmarking tool in 2017, we really have a common language to assess regulatory maturity and really see where we are on this global journey. I think the good news is there's much progress that's been made and it's well worth the investment. And of course, when we get to reliance and harmonization, the returns are well worth it. It brings great efficiency, it improves patient access, and it also catalyzes industrial development and enables local pharmaceutical manufacturers to thrive. Still, only about 25% of WHO member states have reached maturity level 3. And maturity level 3 is a really important indicator of a well-functioning regulatory system. So we have some ways to go. What does it take? And I'm just going to give you a few examples of some of the challenges that regulators face on their maturity journey. And some of these are going to be really familiar for the global health audience, and some of them are more particular to the regulator context. So I'll just give you a little flavor here. So this one's probably a pretty familiar challenge. Human resources is a major issue. Often regulatory authorities face a major brain drain. They'll train their staff, get them up to capacity, and then ultimately they exit and leave to industry for better paying jobs. So this is a major common challenge. Obviously, the best answer is to pay staff more, be competitive with industry. This can be achieved through regulatory autonomy and fee setting. And we've seen this with the US FDA in some capacity and other regulators around the world. But we also advocate for some additional measures, which is really institutionalizing systems and processes, SOPs, quality management systems, so that the system itself is strengthened and isn't quite as reliant on human resources, which are nonetheless vital. Another challenge, which is really unique to the regulatory authority and is the global challenge, is really how do you survey the quality of medicines in your marketplace? It's like boiling the ocean. So how do you choose? And it's an incredibly important activity, but it's also very costly, particularly in the lower middle income setting, where laboratories may need to bring reagents, even various service agreements from abroad. So it's all an outsized cost. So how to contend with this? Well, we really advocate for a risk-based approach to surveilling the marketplace, really to pick those drugs that are of public health priority, are at higher risk for quality challenges, and to survey in that fashion. Additionally, testing can be risk-based as well. If you look at the package and it's clearly a falsified medicine or an unregistered medicine, you can stop there. You don't have to complete the testing. So a 3-level testing approach is what we've implemented. Another example, and probably a familiar pain point for many in the global health community, is dossier backlogs. So of course, regulators are generally under-resourced, and the market authorization function is often significantly under-resourced, leading to 2+ year backlogs, which of course fundamentally impact patient access, timely access to new medicines, new treatments. There's no panacea for this beyond, of course, hiring more staff and investing more. But one thing that we do advocate for is avoiding a first in, first out approach in dossier reviews. So instituting processes that prioritize public health or other objectives like industrial development to make sure the most important medicines get to the patient first. Another uniquely well, it may not be unique just to regulators, but this idea that as they advance in their maturity, of course, they have to implement higher standards, raise the bar, which can often create significant access challenges. This often happens when new GMP requirements are implemented or requirements for bioavailability or bioequivalence testing are implemented. So, how does the regulatory authority raise the bar and implement this without imperiling access? What we've seen as very effective is a phase-in approach, which really requires numerous joint consultations with industry. An example would be the GMP roadmap that I've seen regulatory authorities implement, which really rates the manufacturers in their local environment, red, yellow, green, and provides a really planful timeline for them to meet those requirements. And the regulator can work hand in hand with industry to help industry reach those new requirements without imperiling patient access. And last but not least, a common challenge is actually technical assistance overload. So well-meaning donors often provide one-off programs for the regulators that may not be aligned with the regulator's priority. This can be a redundancy or a distraction. So we really advocate for well-developed strategic plans and institutional development plans that can provide roadmaps for donor investment. So I hope this gave you just a little bit of a sampling of what the journey to regulatory maturity, which of course is quite vital, entails. So what's next? Of course, there's a continued need to build individual national regulatory capacity to enable harmonization and reliance, which is really the holy grail for patient access. The good news is that increasingly there's been a post-COVID recognition of the importance of investing in pharmaceutical ecosystems, including regulators, as a global health security imperative. And we hope this will continue, this investment will sustain. What we're hearing from regulatory authorities is they have to continue to evolve with the medicines marketplace. Some emerging needs include support with regulation of APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, complex generics, and biologics. There's also a need for a greater bioavailability and bioequivalence capacity, particularly in resource-constrained settings. So with that, thank you for the opportunity again, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emily, for sharing that enriching perspective with us. We now move on to the panel discussion, the last one for the day. Moderating this session is Mr. Girish Bomakanti, the Global Director for Operations and Strategic Growth at Access Health International, with 22 years of experience in healthcare transformation and innovative financing. He oversees Access Health International's operations across South Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Girish, please join us. Next, we have Dr. Rajiv Chibbar, representing the voice of India's medical device industry on the global stage. As Vice President of External Affairs at Sahajanand Medical Technologies, one of India's leading medical device manufacturers, he works at the intersection of public health advocacy, regulatory policy, and industry-academia collaboration. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rajiv Chibbar. Joining us virtually from the African continent is Dr. Alex Juma Ismail, a regulatory pharmacist working to establish the African Medicines Agency and advance regulatory harmonization across Africa through the African Union Development Agency, or DANEPAD. Thank you very much, Dr. Alex, for joining us today, and we apologize for the delay. And completing this panel is our very own Mr. Maulik Chokshi, Global Director for Health Systems Research and Policy at Access Health International. Maulik holds 24 years of experience in research, teaching, training across medicine procurement, pricing, immunization, and health financing. Over to you, Girish, to take the session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuti. And I think Dr. Alex, you're there online just to say hello to you. Alex, you're there online?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Alex, so much. And thanks for the panel to be there. I know there's a bit of a delay during the day, but I think we'll try to make it more interesting. There are no more presentations. It's a purely a panel discussion now. Okay. And also is that we have a very interesting discussion. And since there's a conflict happening on the geopolitical, the wars, which we see, and also we see the huge issue on supply chain disruption, which is happening. So with the given thing, so we try to just get into the discussions, the real issues, and also look at what the panels have to say. So I'll start with Alex. And Alex, you've been part of the AMA thing, and with the other NEPAD, you are taking care of the entire space. Can you reflect from your point of view what AMA is doing, and also the convergence on the regulatory aspects you want to really look at? I missed out. Sorry, Dr. Emily, you are still there. Thanks for being with us. I know you have a hard stop at 5:30. We'll continue with you in the panel discussions. Thank you for being there. Over to you, to Dr. Alex.
No, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to this important discussion and for giving Africa also a space on the table. So I've been working with the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization, which is a program, a foundational program that led into the establishment of the African Medicines Agency, the continental body in Africa. We started the journey in 2009, and the idea for Africa was to support local production and to boost local production. And with this, Africa adopted what we called the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa, or PMPA. And with the implementation of this plan, it was decided that we do it in a stepwise approach. And we started with identifying challenges, the biggest challenges that hinders local production in Africa. And the first one was fragmented regulatory systems that do not speak to each other, systems that are very weak, are not responsive to the needs for manufacturing. So this is when the program, the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Program, was created. After 2-3 years of its creation, we decided to start implementation in what we call regional economic communities. Africa is divided into a number of regional economic communities. There are 55 countries, and those countries are blocked into different regional economic communities. There are 8 regional economic communities that are recognized by the African Union. And we started in the East African region, which is the East African community, to harmonize. And we started with generics products. And with the generics, so the idea was to, first of all, develop standards, guidelines, and requirements that are harmonized across the member states. There were 7 member states in that region. And once that was done, the Council of Ministers in that region approved these guidelines. Then we invited manufacturers to participate in this process, which was a pilot to us. And this was the program was launched in East African Community in 2012, and we launched this pilot in 2015. We invited manufacturers, and we received a number of applications, and most of them from India, and a few from China, a few from also other international manufacturers that are located in Europe. So we started then with the joint assessments. So we received these ones, and we had sessions where we did the assessments, and we also did joint inspections. And the most I think advantage that we saw with this process is that for the first time in Africa, we were able to see a single process leading to one recommendation that was applicable to multiple countries. And there were 7 countries at the time. And we also were able to measure then after these recommendations were obtained. So in the regional processes, we were not getting decisions, it was just recommendations. Then the countries were still sovereign to make their own decisions. So then we measured timelines, and we observed a significant reduction in terms of timelines. And we continue with the process, expanding it to more products, to also more regulatory functions. We also went to other regions in Africa, and 12, 13 years later, the idea of now establishing a continental body came in because we saw this as a proof of concept. It worked. This is when we started negotiating for the treaty to establish the African Medicines Agency, which would be the second, I think, continental body globally next after the European Medicines Agency. This treaty was adopted by heads of states and governments in 2019, and in 2021 it came into force. Now we have the African Medicines Agency sustaining the efforts. So for me, the most important achievement is that now we are able to sustain the efforts through the institution. So we've institutionalized these efforts through the African Medicines Agency. Now we are looking forward into AMA, bringing a value in terms of looking at products that are very complex, innovative products, responding to emergencies, and the areas where most of our countries are struggling. I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Maybe I'll have a follow-up question with Dr. Emily. Is that, as you have rightly pointed out, is that strengthening the NRS and also WHO ML3 is 25%, as you have stated. And in Africa, I think there are around 7 to 8 countries which qualify to ML3. Looking from that and from USP, how do you think you would look at this harmonization, that is the making it easy from a regulatory perspective? What do you think with AMA or from Africa, you would see things progressing?
Yeah, well, I think there's tremendous progress. And of course, my friend and colleague Alex knows very well. There are 9 ML3 regulatory authorities on the continent now, and many more coming online fairly rapidly. But when you hear Her Excellency Dr. Darko speak, she really underscores the important role that national regulatory authorities play in driving and feeding into AMA, and the importance of continued strengthening of these individual NRAs so they can all input and together make for a stronger AMA. So there's still work to be done. I think one of the promises of the African Medicines Agency, which Dr. Alex pointed out, is really that capability to review complex medicines, new modalities, and really help speed the review of those that may not be in the capacity of most regulatory authorities in Africa. But it's still a long journey. I think AMA set up its offices just a few months ago in Rwanda. So there's a lot of work continuing, as I understand it, to really develop a clear strategic plan and to articulate that as it's starting so that we can all get behind it and provide the required support.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. I'll come to Dr. Rajiv. Now, seeing from India, and you've been in this space for long, how do you see this harmonization and localization from your perspective?
See, traditionally, if we look at 20 years to 25 years back, the harmonization within India was limited within the region itself. We did not have any quality regulatory forums which were connecting us to maybe Europe, to the US, to the Middle East, or even to the APAC region. Now, I wouldn't say post-COVID, but I would say maybe post-2000, when the pharma developed more, and after 2015, when the medical device sector developed, CDSO looked at devising this pharma harmonization, the regulatory harmonization, because we saw an opportunity of India reaching out globally. You look at pharmaceuticals, the generics that today US uses, almost 73% of it is out of India. Even the maximum number of US FDA sites outside of US is in India itself. So, there was this entire need to look at regularly, revisiting and harmonizing on the pharma sector. And that's where into 2015, when the medical device industry became the entire sunshine sector on behalf of the government of India, is where we try to reach out to the to the medtech regulatory forum. uh, I mean, it took some time because India only signed the IMDRF, which is India International Medical Devices Regulatory Forum, in 2023. So you can imagine from 2015, when the sector was a sunshine sector or announced as a sunshine sector, the regulatory authorities, since medtech was a newer area and developing area and in its nascent stages, the regulatory authorities looked at how access to the international harmonization could happen. But till date, if we look at it, we do not have that kind of a convergence with FDA, US FDA. If I look at it, the convergence is bare minimum right now. With the European Union, yes, with MDR and MDR now developing into a bigger, mammoth, they are looking at regulatory harmonization, but that is going to take time. In the meanwhile, what we've done is we've started tweaking our own CDSO here, and the CDSO is now looking at how medtech regulatory can be looked at in a way where companies like us, which are big and outgrown within the country, can now be net exporters. And for that, what are the harmonization pathways that are required? So I think that's going on simultaneously. It's a slightly long journey. I think by 2020, 30, 2035, we will be able to achieve that entire ease of doing business in that sense.
Thanks, Dr. Rajiv. I'll move to Maulik. Maulik, if you look from resilient supply chains, right, and we had COVID, we have conflicts, and we also seen India move from A point to a B point as net exporter. So, what are the key lessons you see? What has been done good, and what you see from a resilience point now, looking at some of the works in resilience happening in Africa and other parts of the globe? What are your views on that? Key lessons to look at?
Thank you very much, Girish, for the question. Uh, I think so. India has also learned its lesson hard way. And I'll quote an example. In 2007, there were international Olympics happening in China. The International Olympics forced China to curb a lot of production sites around Beijing to curb pollution, so that the environment in which Olympics happen is in a much controlled environment. So now, what does this have with Indian pharmaceutical industry? The amoxicillin prices in that particular months rose by 70%. It denotes the dependency of Indian pharmaceutical API industry on to global market. And that's what learning for us was. If you want your health systems to be resilient, if you want your pharmaceutical industry to be resilient, you need to have production capacity right from API to packaging to be built in India, right? And henceforth, in 2016 or 17, it was API year announced for India. Then a lot of focus was developing our active pharmaceutical ingredient, so that the dependency on countries during emergency or during some global shock is avoided. And I thought that's a big learning that we have taken as part of our G20 efforts also, when we talk about South-South collaboration, that countries need to develop their own production capacity. They need to develop their own supply chain. So when there is a shock, whether it's a geopolitical shock or it's like war going on right now, or there is some climatic change, the local production capacity has got abilities to kind of meet to the demand of the nation. Now it comes to second question, which is kind of very interesting that people have learned from India, and I think so. GCC Middle East have started at their GCC models of procurement of medicine. If we have got enough production capacity, we also need enough absorptive capacity. If you don't have enough demand, right, then the economies of scale principle does not apply out there. So your prices of medication goes on a much higher side. The states of India are a country in itself as far as population and demand is concerned. So we started kind of moving forward towards pool procurement, where we have got economies of scale, and economies of scale defining the quality of medicine and the prices at which quality of medicines could be procured. And so these learnings are fantastic to make sure that innovative molecules or generic molecules are available into public health system. So I think so these are two big lessons both on the production side as well as in terms of supply chain, where whatever commodities available in your ecosystem is available to the consumer or the beneficiary, I would say here. And the third good thing that people can learn is also decentralization and centralization of regulation. And why I'm saying so is as follows. If you've got a generic medications available, right, and there are standard protocols already being laid in, the time of market approval becomes a crucial factor as far as pricing of medicine is concerned. So if you've got decentralized kind of a regulatory approval mechanism of lead medication kind of standardized protocols being set up, that decentralization can decrease your market authorization or market approval time period, which has got effect on medication. And simultaneously, if you have got high-end biosimilars and expensive medication, you can have a centralized procurement or centralized kind of regulatory mechanism. So this dual kind of regulatory mechanism also helps in market to grow at much faster rate, which again, as Alex mentioned, I think so, if you have got multiple countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we can have kind of economies of scale on procurement. We can have you already mentioned about regulatory authority being centralized, but also certain functions could be decentralized so that we can kind of decrease the time taken for market approval, henceforth faster market penetration and reduce pricing in the market. Thank you.
Can I add into it? Yeah. See, what Maulik just said is actually a great example of what the Indian industry did during the COVID pandemic. Now, as he said, there's a geographic concentration which normally happens, and your dependence becomes in to one or two countries. APIs is a classic example. It's either US or China that we looked at. Today, if we look at it, that shock was a huge shock for the Indian industry. We closely linked it with the visibility of the lack of going beyond tier 1 cities. They were tier 2 and tier 3 cities were not able to even understand the conundrum of it. So I think when we look at this, the concentration and the regional dynamics is a big issue, and that's where I also agree with him. That if you're looking at supply chain vulnerabilities, or if you're looking at critical supply chains to be really mooted, maybe that Atmanirbhar Bharat needs to be one of the bigger road shows that every country needs to do it.
Means I'll just extend that argument or discussion point what Maulik and Raju said to Emily, is that, do you see in a normal times you have the regular process? When there's a disruption, do you see from the standards point of view you want to tweak it to make sure the supply chains are still normal? That is one. The other thing is that the pool procurement process, which has been suggested, your views on that, what you have seen working from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in a crisis situation, standards still play a critical role. Often there's a proliferation of substandard medicines that enter the market, right? Because there's not enough. So bad actors come in and say, here, take this fake thing. So we really need to do utilize standards more in that kind of crisis situation. But of course, regulators need to be prepared with emergency use authorization pathways and ways to bring in additional products into their marketplace in a shortage setting. I can't emphasize enough, of course, the importance of pooled procurement in any kind of situation, right, to aggregate demand. And USP really tracks drivers of shortages and vulnerabilities in the supply chain. And a couple areas that I think panelists have already picked up on. Number one causes of shortages or chronic shortages are one, complexity to manufacture. So that's an obvious one. Two is cost, right? When you race to the bottom and there's not enough of offtake guarantees, there's not a willingness to pay for quality, you end up with shortages. Quality matters themselves cause shortages, And finally, concentration of supply, which we've talked a lot about. We can't get all of our API or all of our finished dose from one single source. So it's a complex ecosystem. There's a diversity of drivers, and I would just point to those four as kind of critical factors in resiliency.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Alex, can you touch upon the pool procurement process in Africa where the continental product listing was done? What was the experience and learning as part of that process?
Yes, thank you very much. So we also wanted to make this centralized regulatory process attractive. And through the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, we established what we call APPM. It's African Pool Procurement Mechanism. And it started, so we got the heads of states and governments to approve it. And we launched its first startup phase last year, and we invited products that have been listed through the pilot that we launched in 2023. And I think now the process is ongoing to select those that will qualify to go through the pool procurement mechanism. But it has really been a game changer, because we are seeing even local manufacturers who are not willing to go to these standards like the continental WHO pre-qualification, for example. They're now willing to explore those pathways so that they can access the pool procurement. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. I'll shift a bit of topic to more the next level as part of this is that on localization. We are trying to harmonize. We want to get self-reliance. Obviously, localization is there in every country, self-reliance. Dr. Rajiv, can you tell, based on your discussion with various countries and other things, in terms of how you are enabling or how do you see the localization happening in different countries? Your thoughts on that?
See, there is now a policy alignment in each and every region on localization. I'm not saying that everything can be made in a particular country. Even the most powerful countries in the world are anywhere between 40 to 55% dependent,
Right.
import dependent.
Right.
India traditionally, and I'm specifically speaking here from a medtech lens. Pardon me, I mean, I'm not taking pharma into the picture, but India, I mean, till almost before the pandemic, if you look at it, inevitably in class B, C, and D devices, India was almost 80% import dependent, especially in the class C and class D devices, the high-end devices that we had. The dependency was huge. Largely MNCs were a part of the system. uh, But then post-pandemic, and as we just discussed, the supply chain shocks and the reliance that one needs to look at, a self-reliant country, one needs to look at, the regionality of diversification came in. What does that mean? Basically means you're trying to stand up to a level where the indigenous domestic industry stands up and multiplies its manufacturing, and that's done through multi-sourcing activities, that's done through government support. Diversification was required. A lot of companies diversified into, I mean, textile companies diversified into PPEs. We had a lot of other companies joining the bandwagon in terms of class C devices, class D devices. Obviously imaging companies had come up. So the entire diversification started happening at that point of time. Now, when we look at the end-to-end supply chain visibility platforms, so those were also ironed off. The government created a crow's nest around it. We kind of created regional hubs. From a medical devices point of view, medtech parks started coming in. The clusters were then identified as specialized clusters. These clusters then supplied what was required in terms of immediate requirement, and then they moved from the weak domestic ecosystem to kind of like creating and catalyzing a new age domestic ecosystem. So those are great ideas, and then the political will is a huge advantage that we had. Domestic manufacturing through the PLI type schemes that were there, or there was assured procurement schemes that came up, the PPO orders, the public private orders, that the public procurement orders, sorry, that came up, that made the demand more visible, that made the demand more palatable, that made the demand more assured. Because when you're kind of like manufacturing and you still feel that the demand is not going to be met because you're not procuring from us, then they didn't see that kind of a thing. So the complete ecosystem, which included MSMEs, ancillary industries, was kind of like created, and the supply chains were strengthened. If you look at not only within the ecosystem, uh, we looked at even labs, we looked at even testing hubs, we looked at industry academia, we looked at how IT and inventory management could be looked at, how supply chains can be ironed off, what could be the poor, the core dependency that we had could actually be converted into an opportunity that we had. So, all these played a big game changer aspect. And today, if you look at it, from 2016, 2017, when I look at the dependency being almost 80%, today the dependency has gone down to exactly 63%. And that's less than a decade, huh? If you look at it, it's less than a decade. So we've been able to iron off at least 20% of the dependency in less than a decade.
Now, what you see, those could be the key indicators of reduction, because one of the things while we are discussing localization is of technology transfers, right? So did you see any technology transfers or the industry adopting to those things? What was the key enablers which happened?
Yeah. I mean, we had immense technology transfers within, from the APAC region. We had Indonesia, we had Vietnam, we had Korea assisting India. Middle East, they was there. US, in any case, at that point of time, we had a lot of hand holding from multinational companies who had come over. So, that TOT was an important part of it. Then academic technologies which came to us. MITs had come over, the Harvards had come over. We had looked at how startups could actually now become more incubated in terms of newer technologies. So all that was a part of the entire ecosystem that was rechurned, accepted. Even if you look at, I mean, incidentally, China came in more rigorously in terms of providing low cost manufacturing or low cost adaptability, but that was into more of pseudo manufacturing, but that was adopted. If you look at it today, unfortunately I'm using the word pseudo manufacturing because what happens is a lot of work, a lot of stuff is, or products are procured from China, just re-sterilized here or repackaged here, and within the system it goes into a low cost or an affordable, I wouldn't say low cost, but in the affordability brackets it could be provided. But that came up very high, and today in 2014-15 we had approximately 400 medtech companies. Today IMED, Association of Indian Medical Devices, has given an estimate of around 1700 medical device companies in the country, which is a huge jump from 400 to 1700. It's like a twofold, threefold jump.
Thank you, Rajiv. Maulik, if you can add on to this, the affordable cost, right? You moved from a high cost to affordable cost. From a policy perspective, what changes, and also look at the localization. The adoption in certain countries is doing well, in certain countries taking time. What do you see from policy and also some of the learnings in this space?
I would emphasize on the fact that purchasing orders, right, preferred purchasing order are a big boost when companies knows that whatever is getting produced is going to get absorbed. It's going to be a big boon for companies to invest. That's one thing. But I think so, and this goes in kind of already established companies to kind of increase their production capacity, as well as newer companies to come into the market. But the most important thing is again a regulatory barrier, addressing the regulatory barriers. So if I say in India, we have to make an under the Made in India or Viksit Bharat or ease of doing business. The key pain point that government of India try to address is the approval process, the time that approval processes take for establishment of a new plant or expansion of new plant. That regulator barrier at times is good enough to discourage people in making newer investment. So as far as your regulatory system is transparent, very, very important. It's kind of responsive to the needs of the industry. I think so. It makes wonders in getting new investment and localization. And for me, new investment is should be interpreted as localization. That's one important aspect. Second, everyone may not have bandwidth to invest. Let's say if, and this is what again very specific to Indian example. We had a pathway patenting in our country till 2000. Pathway patenting. So any minute there are 10 different pathways to produce paracetamols, and each pathway could be patented. We shifted and we became part of the harmonization effort, and we say that no, we are going to go for a product patenting, right? Now, when you go for GMP certification, product patenting, there is a cost that a company is going to incur. I would say 6 years down the lane, the cost was around 1 crore Indian rupees. Now the cost has gone to 2.5 crore Indian rupees to make a facility GMP certified. And that's where again the incentive schemes comes that the government kind of announced. And I think so what Rajiv also mentioned, PLI, the performance linked incentives. And also there was also incentive given for upgradation of GMP facilities. So that kind of facilitation effort, pre-market kind of order picking up, kind of easing of regulatory barriers, ensuring that the facilities get kind of a low cost access to financing to upgrade their facility, kind of helps in really localization of industry. And the most important part, which again Raji mentioned and dwelling a bit more, is having integrated tech paths. When I say integrated tech paths, most of the supply chain that we are talking here right now is assuming that is a commodity which is has completed its clinical trials and is going to hit the market. But you have got integrated tech park where you have got your right from identification of a product, innovative molecule, to kind of testing, to production, to post-marketing surveillance. If you have got those integrated hubs, which India has got 4, and they are doing fantastically well in making sure that while we are developing a commodity, we are also getting trained on the regulatory aspects so that the time taken for market approval goes down. See, for procurement supply chain, it's very simple. Time is money. Longer is the cost for procurement, longer is the cost of supply, it's the commodity becomes expensive. And all these 3 or 4 aspects that I shared can really reduce the time of commodities being available in the market and help in localization.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. I'll come to Emily just to add on to the same point, is that while from a regulatory process, we hear from the panel and also from the industry, it takes time to reach that space. Just looking at Africa right now, with the AMA being there, centralization, so regulatory will take time. And I'm just quoting from a recent webinar we did in Jan. This is an example there where one of the panelists was referring towards that Morocco would want to be part of the entire centralization, but since it takes time, they are looking alternative pathways for self-reliance. So in that journey, can you just put a thinking at that regulatory will take time, but what do you think could be solutions for the countries, because it's taking time? So what could be done to meet these scenarios in short term and medium term?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Alex really already pointed to quite a few solutions. I think the advent of AMA will, take time to really realize its full potential. Just started, but it will provide, and already through AMRH previous to AMA, there were pathways created for continental joint review of medicines. And so that is a quicker route that I expect. We'll wait for Her Excellency's advice, and I'm sure Dr. Alex can comment on this well. We'll wait to see how that materializes. There's also a lot of opportunity, and we see this kind of mutual reliance among ML3 or level 3 regulatory authorities in Africa, where Ghana and South Africa get together and share information and jointly speed medicines to market. So I think that's another pathway. You're going to see some of that organic collaboration as well. And then there's the regional economic communities, which also create another pathway. I mean, none of it's perfect. It's bumpy. We still have a lot of authorities that our countries that need to sign on to AMA. So these things take time, but I think there is progress. Most importantly, and since I'm from USP, I think it's really important that the regulatory authorities, and I know AMA will do this as well, be a voice for setting the right bar for quality of medicines. Otherwise, we create an environment where the bad actors are rewarded and there's a proliferation of substandard medicine. So we have to create an environment that rewards those that invest in quality and do the right thing, and regulators play a critical role in this. So that'll be my closing, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Emily, for joining us. Dr. Alex, do you see some of these works which has happened within Africa on the mutual pathways, the reliance models, where the existing agreements within the countries, do you see that is helping in easing some of the regulatory challenges?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I wanted to also comment on what Dr. Kane mentioned. What we are seeing, and this is, is evidence-based, and what we've seen so far is that we've cut down the timelines. For example, if you submit a new vaccine today to a country, let's say Nigeria, in Africa, it might take them up to two to 3 years to review and make a decision. Because of a number of issues, capacity, in terms of the human resources, but also the testing and the complexity in the processes that they've put forward. And also understanding that Africa as a market is not as attractive as other big markets. That also would add to the challenge of manufacturers not wanting to go to Africa. With the centralization process, we started this with the 7 countries in East Africa. We reduced the number of days from the 2 to 3 years to an average of 165 days for most of the products that went through that process. And countries then committed to make a decision within 90 days from that decision. And we measured that for multiple countries. So the seven countries, we had 5 countries meeting the timelines for all the products. We did this study in 2023, and we were able to see at least 80% of the countries made decision within the timelines. And overall, from a submission of an application to a decision, there was a reduction in timelines. So, and what we are seeing at a centralization level, at the AMA level, is that you are able, instead of you preparing dossiers for 54 countries, having to host 54 countries to come for GMP inspection or a quality audit for medical devices, instead of you having to get, number of questions from 54 countries, you get a single set of questions. There will be one team representing the entire continent to come and do the inspection, and then there will be a single outcome or recommendation that will apply to all these countries. We've not yet seen it in practice. Theoretically, we think we'll be able to achieve, significantly, but this is something that we are looking forward to. But we did a pilot from 2023 to last year. We evaluated the pilot. Again, 177 days from submission to a decision at a continental level, and a median of 77 days for countries to make a decision. There was a target of 23 countries by these manufacturers. Decision was made within the timelines in 20 countries out of the 23 countries that were of interest to this pilot. And from that pilot, we are now doing a lessons learned, which will help us to establish the African Medicines Agency, this centralization procedure, and hopefully we'll be able to make AMA, serve that purpose where we want to have the continent as just one regulatory block. You don't have to go to all these countries to get a decision, a registration. You go through the African Medicines Agency, and then the African Medicines Agency will have the countries then making their decisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. You want to add something? Yeah, maybe before we close this session, I'll just take from each panelist, maybe a point around what you think would be critical from a resilient supply chains from your perspective, what you're looking at.
So I would, say that we build regionally distributed, self-reliant manufacturing ecosystems for critical health products. Because if we can actually look at regional resilience, self-reliance is the biggest thing and the biggest learning that one can look at. India took it head on. Today, if you look at it, as I said, our dependence from 83% has gone down to 63 to 65%. It's a huge stride if you look at a country like us. If you look at, the kind of, dependence that we were with, the technology deprivation that we had at that one point of time. And today, even if you look at the disruptions that we have, the supply chain disruptions, the kind of technology handicapness in terms of high-end equipments, I think that's a very important and a critical juncture that one needs to look at. So for me, it's actually a priority action, and we need to build regionally distributed, self-reliant manufacturing ecosystems for critical health products.
Thank you.
My take would be to get, for India at least, and I think so most of the country needs to do it. We need to have a pharmaceutical monitoring information system, PMIS.
Okay.
And when I say PMIS starts from what the production capacity is, what the demand is, and how that ecosystem is changing. And we need to have that information because epidemiological shifts are happening after every 2 years, right? The demand of commodities is changing after every 2 years. So you need to have a mechanism to produce that, a mechanism to assess that. That assessment can lead into production as well as distribution of commodities. That's one important thing. And second aspect is that since epidemiology is shifting, since commodities coming to the market are changing, so is the regulatory landscape changing very fast. So I think so. A lot of Indian companies end up in a difficult situation because some regulation at FDA changed. One pathway or one path within the regulatory system got changed, and we need to adopt to that ASAP. So we need to have that kind of mechanism where any changes into regulatory space or kind of a market approval processes are known to us real time so that we can comply, because that means that current regulatory system or current production system needs to change to meet that particular change in approval process. So I would say PMIS are non-negotiable, and ability to have a real-time kind of information of what regulatory changes are happening in the pathways would can really strengthen ecosystem at any country level. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. What do you, Alex?
Coming from a regulatory background, I think I would see creating regulatory environment that enables systems to work, other systems that requires the support of regulatory environment, like the supply chains, the manufacturing, and all the processes that requires regulatory services. And I think if we invest in creating environment that are enabling, then we'll be able to ensure that these systems are resilient and serves the people that we want to serve. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. I'll just summarize some of the key takeaways from the panel discussion is that given the current challenges what we have on the resilient supply chains, I think while we have time taking in the regulatory pathways, but it is non-negotiable from a quality perspective, which is essential. But what is working in pilots and what is making sense in terms of agreements between countries is the reliance pathways, mutual agreements can solve some of those challenges for sure. And the other thing is also is that in terms of localization, is dependent on the incentives, the government and the policy which is driving the change. I think that is what is coming out. And also ability to prioritize what you want to produce versus what you want to procure. And you can also strategize in terms of purchasing, how you want to produce at that affordable cost. I think that is coming clear. Regulatory pathways are not real-time availability, the monitoring systems, the IT. I think that is also an important lever for anybody who are present in multi-country and global regions to really look at your regulatory pathways. And I think most important point is driving your local manufacturing system. The ecosystem itself is coming very strongly in this panel discussion. I think in generally to be meeting some of these requirements in the current emerging scenarios, I think across the regions, these are the key takeaways. I would say is that thanks to the panel for everybody joining, and also apologies for a bit of delay in starting this, but thanks for your patience and thanks for all your insights. Thank you and have a good day.